I then proceeded to the Harvard School of Public Health and did a postdoctoral research assistantship at the Harvard School of Public Health in the Department of Tropical Public Health from 1981 through 1985.
And throughout your career, have you continued to work in the areas that you've just described?
Yes, I have. I got my initial position in the Division of Geographic Medicine at Case Western Reserve University in 1985. In 1989, I moved to Geographic Medicine at the University of Alabama at Birmingham as a tenured associate professor. I was promoted to full professor in 1995 and then moved to the University of South Florida in 2008 as in the Department of Global Health at that point in time in the College of Public Health. I've conducted research over this entire period as an active researcher in emerging diseases, tropical diseases, and have 283 current publications in the peer-reviewed literature.
And those publications have those, you said peer-reviewed literature, so those publications have been peer-reviewed?
That's correct.
And I know that you've already explained to the court that you're on vacation, but have you been compensated for your testimony today?
No, I have not.
Thank you. And Dr. Unash, obviously we're here in reference to COVID-19. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Did you have something you wanted to say, or were you just talking?
No, Your Honor, we're just trying to make sure that when we switch from Mr. Abel to my computer, we don't get the feedback we're getting now. So can we have a moment, Your Honor?
Sure.
It's some of that. It sounds supposed to come out here.
If y'all are listening to yourself on the radio or watching yourself on YouTube, you might get feedback.
Jared, it's supposed to come out through here. That's the problem. Where's the remote? There it is. Your Honor, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Thank you, Your Honor. Fortunately, we have younger people that know the technology better than me too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I can hear myself feeding back, but I'll try to be quiet. So go ahead, Ms. Barnett.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Unash, specifically, have you conducted any or read any of the research in relation to the COVID-19 virus and its variants?
Yes, I stay very current on the COVID-19 literature. I serve as basically the scientific update reporter for the emergency response group at the University of South Florida. So I have to stay current with that literature. And I have been a principal investigator or a co-PI on 2 research grants that deal with—
Dr. Unash, I'm getting feedback from somebody. Mr. Bean, is that your office? You know, we need to figure something out. If you have multiple lawyers in the same office giving each other feedback, you're going to have to start warm bunking on offices. Hot bunking, sorry. That's a naval term if anybody doesn't know what that means.
Yeah, it is. I'm a retired Navy captain.
Okay. Well, you're familiar with hot bunking. Well, as a captain, you wouldn't be. I think that's for enlisted people, right? All right, whenever you're ready.
Okay, Dr. Unash, let's try this again. I think with everyone on mute, perhaps we're not going to get the feedback. You said you were current because you're part of the emergency response group at the University of South Florida. Is that correct?
Yes, I report. I am the scientific reporter and reporting on the current status at USF in Hillsborough County and over the state of Florida on a weekly basis to that group. And I'm also the co-investigator or on one COVID-19 related project and a principal investigator on a second COVID-19 project. I'm also the principal investigator of the high containment laboratory where all of the COVID-19 research at USF is being carried out.
And so for those of us not in academia, by saying that you're the principal investigator, what does that mean?
That's the guy in charge of overall running the program on the research program. So it's equivalent to a chief executive officer in a company for a research program. Can
you explain to the court what we mean by variants of COVID-19? What does that mean?
Sure. Well, the original version of the virus that we had was the progenitor version, which came out of Wuhan, China, back in probably November of 1919. Since then, this virus has been replicating rapidly throughout the world, both in humans and in other animals. And as it does so, it accumulates mutations in its genome. It mutates at a rate that's about 30-fold lower than what the common influenza virus does, but that's still plenty of quick mutation rate to allow it to accumulate a large number of mutations. These then get selective pressure applied to them by the natural selection process that's out there. And occasionally one of these mutations will have a selective advantage. Either in infectivity or ability to escape the immune system. And it will begin to take over and therefore supplant all the other variants or mutations that are out there and become a dominant or a co-dominant form of the virus. And these are what we call our variants.
And so since the original Wuhan virus in November of 2019, have there been multiple identified variants?
Oh, many, many variants at this point in time. I would guess probably upwards of 20 to 30 different variants at this point in time have been identified. And they are generally classified as unclassified variants, variants of interest, which are variants that seem to be having a selective advantage in being able to become a significant proportion of the infections that are out there, or variants of concern, which are variants that seem to exhibit some sort of a trait that makes it much more dangerous than the previous variants. So out of the ones that we've had circulating, that the dozens that have been identified so far, most of them just die out and aren't able to gain a foothold. But occasionally you have variants that are able to gain a foothold and basically can take over. And we've had about 3 or 4 different variants out there that have been able to do so. And right now we have maybe another 2 or 3, 4 variants or so that are variants of interest that people are keeping an eye on.
And Dr. Unash, these variants that take hold, as you said, are those the variants that are given names?
Yes, those are usually when they're identified as a variant of concern, that kind of moves them from the tropical depression standpoint to the named storm standpoint, same sort of thing. So they are getting names as they become moved up to be variants of concern.
And so far, the variants that we're going to be discussing that have become named variants, can you tell the court what those variants are?
Well, there are several ones that are out there that we've really been paying attention to. Probably the original variant that we've had that was major concern was the Alpha variant, which arose in the United Kingdom in November of last year, and then rapidly took over and supplanted all the other variants that were out there pretty much worldwide. There is a Beta variant that's out there, which was originated in South Africa basically last summer. It first appeared in South Africa as a vaccine breakthrough variant, which meant that it was able to have a reduced ability to be neutralized by the immune response generated to the vaccines. That one really hasn't taken off very much as well. The most important one I think out there right now is this Delta variant. The Delta variant is a highly infectious variant that swept through in the spring of this year, beginning in India, and has subsequently managed to become by far the predominant variant here in the United States and worldwide, now recognized or representing over 90% of the isolates that we're seeing here in the United States.
And what do you mean by isolates that we're seeing here in the United States? Can you explain what that means?
Sure. What is happening here is that some subset, that's a fairly random subset of people that are out there, when they have a positive test, that RNA from that positive test gets sent off for genomic sequencing. And doing the whole genome sequence, you can classify it based upon the variant that they came from. So, in the spring of this year, we were seeing the majority, January, February, March of this year, the majority of isolates that we were seeing when they got sequenced turned out to be the Alpha variant. We first started seeing this Delta variant really appear in Florida here in about late May, early June of this year. And it just took over in an immensely rapid rate. And for the last, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks or so, it's been by far the most predominant variant that we see out there, with over 80% of the isolates that have been sequenced coming out of Florida now are this Delta variant.
Now, Dr. Unash, we hear a lot or have heard a lot about a viral load of Delta. What does that mean?
What that just means is how much virus a person is producing in their respiratory tract. So you can take a sample out of the respiratory tract and measure the total number of viral particles that are in the sample that you get out of the respiratory tract. And with the Delta virus, there are about 1,000 times more virus particles in the respiratory tract of a person infected with Delta as there were compared to the Wuhan strain of the virus, the original strain of the virus.
In more simplified terms, does that mean that someone who coughs the Delta virus is coughing more of the virus into the air than one of the previous variants?
That's absolutely true, yes. Probably up to 1,000 times more virus.
There's also been a lot of information or discussion about an R naught. What is an R naught?
Well, yes, R naught, that's R0 basically, in the British term, which is where it was originally developed, is a really simple concept, actually. It's if a person is infectious, on average, how many people, susceptible people, does that person go ahead and infect? So if you have a virus with an R naught of 2, for example, every individual that gets infected and becomes infectious on average infects 2 additional people. And what this really pertains to is in a totally susceptible population. So if you're introducing, that's what the naught is. So when you introduce the virus into a totally susceptible population, on average, how many new infections are spun off from each infection that occurs?
And Dr. Unash, let's talk specifically about the original Wuhan and the variants. What was the R naught for the original Wuhan virus?
The original Wuhan virus had an R naught somewhere between 1.5 and 2, which meant that every person who was infected on average gave rise to 1.5 to 2 new infected people.
And then you said there was the next most potent would have been the Alpha variant, the UK Alpha variant. What was the R naught for the UK Alpha variant?
It was about 50% greater than the Wuhan variant. So it had an R naught of around 3. So on average, every infected person gave rise to 3 new infections.
And what is the present average R naught for the Delta variant that we're seeing?
It's somewhere north of twice as bad as the Alpha variant. So the R naught of the Delta has been estimated to be somewhere between 6 and 8. So 1 infected person gives rise to 6 to 8 new infections.
Now, I know that you have an analogy to explain the differences in the R naughts and the percentages. Can you provide that? Can you describe that to the court?
Sure. The analogy or the little thought experiment I like to do with everybody is imagine you have 3 islands in the Pacific Ocean that have never seen COVID-19 with large populations. Okay, on the 1st of August, a plane lands on Island A, and on Island A, a person gets off who is infectious with the Wuhan strain of the virus. The same day, just about the same time, on Island B, somebody gets off an airplane who's infectious with the Alpha strain of the virus. And on Island C, somebody gets off about the same time who is infectious with the Delta virus. You come back on September 1st and you say, gee, what's the situation on these 3 islands currently? Well, on the first island where you had the Wuhan infection that's circulating, they're experiencing 64 new cases a day. On the second island, which is infected with the Alpha virus, they're experiencing roughly 729 new cases a day. And on the third island with the Delta virus, they're experiencing 46,656 new cases a day. So you can see that the Delta virus is potentially a much more explosive virus in terms of its spread than the other viruses that we've seen circulating up to this point in time.
And Dr. Unash, just so that I understand, and the court understands, that we're talking about the compounding each person infecting 6 to 8 others, and those 6 to 8 others infecting 6 to 8 others,
right,
et cetera. Is that correct?
So with the Wuhan virus, that one person infected 2, those 2 people infected 4, and so on. With the Alpha virus, one person infected 3, those 3 went on to infect a total of 9, and so on. With the Delta virus, one person infected 6, those 6 went on to infect 36, and so on. So it's the miracle of compound interest. It's exactly what you want to see in your individual retirement account, which is a really good yield. And you want to see exponential growth over time. But in this case, it's exponential growth of a pretty terrifying infection.
Now, Dr. Unash, I know you said that you're being part of the emergency response group. I shared with you the plaintiff's exhibit 5, 6, and 7, which are exhibit 5 being the Florida Department of Health COVID statistics for the week ending in August the 6th. Did you have an opportunity to review those?
Oh, yes.
And specifically in that exhibit, which we might be able to put on the screen, but I know everybody has it, just that we're looking at the correct exhibit. If we can't, it's okay. I'm going to keep moving. Exhibit 5 was the Florida Department of Health COVID statistics for the week ending in August the 6th of this year, 2021. On page 1, it references the new COVID cases, positivity rate, and new COVID deaths. Dr. Unash, and looking at those numbers, are they significant to you, and for what reason?
Well, yes,
Your Honor,
but
I'm sorry, Doctor. Your Honor, we object. The executive order was signed on July 30th, so any data post July 30th is not relevant for these proceedings. Thank you.
Overruled. You can answer.
Fine. Well, I'd like to answer for July 6th, but I can say parenthetically the data for the previous weeks was actually even much worse than what we saw on the August 6th report that came out. And basically what you're seeing here, I think the important thing to really look at, honestly, is the new daily case numbers, because the new daily case numbers are the most current measure of what's going on with the infection or the epidemic at the moment. Deaths lag a lot after when people get infected, and as do hospitalizations, which lag probably about 2 weeks in general after what the levels of infections are. And what you can see is an unfortunate, really almost exponential rise in the daily case numbers for the new daily cases that are shown up there. Without that line, that's just continuing upwards. And around August 6th, we were still seeing a R value in Florida that was around 1.4, which meant that the number of cases was doubling about once every 2 weeks. Earlier in July, right before the executive order was signed, the R0 had increased to the highest I'd ever seen since I began doing the calculations here, which was somewhat above 1.5 with a doubling time about once every 8 days.
And so in July, the reports that were coming across the desk were showing an R0, you said the highest you'd ever seen?
Correct.
And specifically in looking at Exhibit 5, if we can go back to Exhibit 5, the numbers on page 1 of Exhibit 5, in referencing to the new COVID-19 cases, showing the 28% increase over the previous week, and the 146% increase in COVID deaths. Back on Exhibit 5.
Yes.
Sorry, page 2. Those are the numbers that you're referencing?
Yes.
From that week's statistics?
Exactly, yes.
Okay. And then moving on to Exhibit 6, which is the CDC's COVID statistics for the week of July 30th through August the 5th. On page 8 of Exhibit 6, the Florida Department of Health breaks down the statistics for those that are under the age of 16. They break them down into different age groups, but specifically the under 16.
Yes.
And showing that there were 8 deaths of children under the age of 16 with a mortality rate per 100,000 population of 0.2%. What does that mean to you, Dr. Unash?
Well, what that is telling us is that the mortality rate here that we are seeing at 0.2%, which is what's pretty much been holding up, means that this infection among children is about twice as, leads to a mortality rate that's about twice what the normal seasonal flu is among the under 16 age cohort.
And is this an increase over the Alpha variant with mortality rates for children under the age of 16?
I can't speak to that directly from this data, but there was just a recent report that came through on Medline over the weekend that did indicate that, yes, indeed, the Delta variant is about twice as virulent in terms of death numbers as the Alpha virus was in that age cohort.
The under 16 age group.
The under 16 age cohort, yes.
Thank you, sir. And then Dr. Unash, I also want to point to you Exhibit 7, which is the Florida Department of Health COVID data for the week ending in August the 12th. So the following week from the previous one. And also looking at page 8 and breakdown for age-related situation report. Under 16, there are 10 deaths, and the mortality rate slightly increased to 0.3%.
Possibly, yes.
And that's also consistent with the other research and data that you have viewed as it relates to COVID and the Delta variants?
Yes, everything that I'm seeing in being reported moving forward so far is that this Delta variant does seem to be a more pathogenic variant than what we've seen up until this point in all age cohorts, and also parenthetically in people who have been vaccinated.
And more pathogenic, can you explain what that means?
More hospitalizations, more deaths, more severe illness.
I think it's fair to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that even with the Delta variant, most children who have the virus will be fine. Is that correct?
That's absolutely
objection leading.
Oh. Sustained.
Mr. Unash, or Dr. Unash, can you explain what the mortality rate means with this specific pathogenic version for children?
It appears that this does appear to be a more pathogenic virus that's causing more illness in children and in all age groups than the variants that we have previously seen.
Now, Dr. Unash, the governor's executive order cited the Brown University study. Are you familiar with the Brown University study?
Yes, thank you very much. I read it yesterday.
And what does the Brown University study reference any data related to the Delta variant?
The Brown University study, no, would not have referenced any data relevant to the Delta variant. It was conducted in the spring of this year, and the Delta variant, at schools during the school year of the 2020 school year spring semester. And so it wouldn't have included anything with the Delta variant, which really took off in late June, early July.
Now, I'm going to follow up on that question before we go back to the Brown University study. Any sort of data reference to the 2020-2021 school year, would that data include anything related to this more serious Delta variant?
Unfortunately, no.
Now back to the Brown University study. What other, what are some important notes as it relates to the Brown University study in determining whether or not masks and masking is important for the Delta variant and to prevent its transmission amongst children and community?
Yes, well, unfortunately, with the Delta variant, with that study that you referred to, the Brown University study, they were trying to really disentangle, and rather unsuccessfully, in my opinion, and in their opinion too, they were pretty upfront about the limitations of the study. A whole variety of different factors that could lead to, the results that they got, which basically showed that the masking really wasn't being, of the students, wasn't really being effective. But they did not really take into account the levels of community transmission when they tried to do this. The masking study was really restricted only to Florida. So the actual total number of cases that they had that they were looking at among the student population was rather low, which means you didn't have really that large amount of power in the study to really see very many differences. They weren't able to control for differences in class densities. They weren't able to control for differences in ventilation. All of which they tried to tease out one from the other rather unsuccessfully. So there were some really strange things in that study. For example, one of the things that they noted was that there seemed to be a higher level of COVID in classrooms that had fewer numbers of students and classrooms that had high densities, which they couldn't really explain. They tried to explain and pointed it out as a deficiency in the study. A second problem that they had is they showed that masking of the school staff was actually more effective than totally masking the students together with the staff, which, from a common sense and standpoint doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why adding additional masks to the students would actually result in an increase in infection levels. And this is really indicative of a real problem that they have with disentangling a whole lot of other factors that are in there. And being able to really only work with relatively small numbers of case numbers, which were, less than 100 overall on each of the points that they were looking at. So there just wasn't enough real case number data there, and they weren't able to really develop a good case controlled study to really isolate these factors and determine what was going on.
And specifically, when you have these sort of results that defy common sense, what does that lead you to believe?
Either you're opening up a whole new paradigm and in a whole area of research that is opening a new reality for us, like Albert Einstein did with the general theory of relativity. Or what you're happening here is the data that you have isn't really constructed to allow you to analyze it in the way that you need to actually get results that reflect what's going on in reality.
Now, has this Brown University study been peer reviewed?
No, it has not.
What does that actually mean? Again, for those of you in academia who do research studies, what does that mean to the layperson?
What that means really to the layperson is that an individual can put together a study and they can report out basically anything they want. But if they want it to be accepted by the scientific community, they will usually send it to a peer-reviewed journal. And what that means is that that journal then takes that article that comes in and they send it out to anywhere, usually between 2 and 4 experts in the field, to look through the article and see if the methods that were used were correct, the data analysis was correct, the conclusions that they drew really reflected what was reported in the data and the analysis, and whether the publication that is there is actually in any way scientifically sound. And usually what happens is that the papers are either rejected outright as not scientifically sound, or they are returned to the author with suggestions for revisions that they can do in their analysis or their experiments to improve the quality of the test of the manuscript.
And are you familiar with who was the primary author of the Brown University study?
No, I am not. I do not know that individual reputation.
Do you know if that individual is a epidemiologist, immunologist, or what that individual's background is?
No, I do not. I should also say that in many cases, when these go out for peer review now, they go out for blinded peer review, which means that the identity of the authors are hidden from the reviewers. So peer review is supposed to be done in such a way that you're only evaluating the science. You're not necessarily evaluating the people that it's coming from.
Now, Dr. Unash, at this point, we know that children under the age of 12 cannot be vaccinated. Are they at a greater risk of contracting the Delta variant?
Yes, of course. If you're not vaccinated, you're going to be at a greater risk for getting the infection.
And
how much greater risk, we're not sure, but yes, they will be at a greater risk.
And does that greater risk also translate to greater risk of transmission to others?
Likely, yes, it will.
Have you consulted with or relied on the CDC recommendations as they are relative to the COVID virus and variants?
Yes, of course. I follow those fairly closely.
And what is the CDC recommending currently for elementary school age children or for school age children?
Universal masking, where if at all possible, apart from medical deficiencies or something like that, for everyone over the age of 6.
And are you familiar with also the American Academy of Pediatrics and their recommendation as it relates to masking children in schools?
Yes, I am.
And what is their recommendation?
It's consistent with the CDC's recommendation, though they do extend it downwards into earlier age groups, recommending mask wearing basically for everybody over about, I think it's about the age of 2. Though recommending, as CDC does, full masking of all individuals over the age of 6.
And Dr. Unash, are you aware of any medical association or society that is not endorsing mandatory masking for children in schools at this time?
I am not aware of anyone, no.
And do you know of any credible scientific or medical data that mandatory masking will cause harm to the general population of children?
I am not, no.
And based upon the evidence you have reviewed concerning the positivity rates and mortality rates, coupled with the effectiveness of masks, can you say with a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that the absence of mandatory masks is likely to result in illness or death of children and others?
Unfortunately, yes. I believe that's likely to occur if we do not maintain masking.
Now, from a scientific perspective, would it be a correct statement to say that mask wearing is negligible in slowing the community spread of the virus?
I would not necessarily agree with that. I would think that there's several early peer-reviewed studies back at the beginning of this, which demonstrated pretty much unequivocally that masking really was very effective at reducing the spread of the virus. Again, though, we're in the Delta era, and within the Delta era, we're in uncharted territory.
short of children remaining in their homes and not attending a public school, what would be and for the under 12 population that cannot be vaccinated, what would be the mitigation that we would need to do for them to have in-person learning?
Unfortunately, the best thing to do would be to get them all vaccinated, but that's not yet possible until the FDA gives at least emergency use approval for vaccinating children under the age of 12. At this point in time, we're back to what we know works for reducing transmission of aerosol-borne viruses, which include masking, which is really usually has shown to be quite effective against almost all aerosol-borne infections. And improving ventilation in the classrooms, making sure that you're having large amounts of air changes in the classroom so that any viral particles that are there are sucked out and replaced by fresh air pretty much as quickly as possible. And then trying to reduce, close contact among the students, to try and do as much distancing as possible. Because of course, if you do have an infected individual, the virus particles will spread, but the density of those virus particles is going to decrease with the cube of the distance because of the volume. So keeping the children as far apart, not packed up right next to each other as much as possible, I think is a really good idea as well.
And that would include not having children's desks touching each other in a group in the classrooms, correct?
Yes, those sorts of things. But again, there's some pretty good evidence out there now that the level of disease and that people develop as a result of the infection with the Delta variant or any of the other COVID variants has a lot to do with the amount of virus that they are actually exposed to. Masks are shown to reduce a double cloth mask about 75 to 80% of the aerosol particles that are produced by an individual, up to N95 masks, which reduce 95 to 99%. So you are going to be dramatically reducing the viral loads when you're wearing masks, no matter what the virus variant is out there.
Now, following that statement, Dr. Unash, if some of the children in the classroom are masked and some of the children aren't, what's the risk to those children that are wearing masks by having unmasked peers?
Yes. So if you take an example for let's take an example of a cloth mask, which is maybe 80% effective, double cloth mask at removing those aerosol particles. If a person is infected and they're wearing a mask and they breathe out, 80% of those particles are going to be caught by that mask, and they're only going to be producing 20% of the amount of particles that they had before. When a person breathes in, about 80% of the particles that are in the air are going to get removed. So if you have two people who are wearing masks together, you're reducing the exposure to the aerosol particles by the susceptible individual by about 80% times 80%. Which is about 92%. Whereas if you have only one individual who is wearing a mask and you have an individual who's not wearing a mask, you're only going to get 80% protection at that point in time. And excuse me, I'll correct myself if I may. The 80% to 80% results in 96% overall removal, not 92%.
Thoroughly impressed by the math. I could not have done that. So
that's MIT for you. What can I say?
And are the positivity rates differing from the data that you're seeing from one community to the next in the state of Florida?
I can not really necessarily answer that question because we're not really getting county by county positivity data, daily positivity data anymore. But statewide, I can tell you the positivity rate is alarmingly high and continuing to climb.
In your opinion, is it safe for children to attend school without mask mandates?
In an ideal world, we wouldn't need a mask mandate and everybody would do the right thing. And even if we didn't have the mask mandate, all the students would come in and be masked. But we unfortunately, obviously, do not live in an ideal world. And I do believe that in the absence of a mask mandate, you're going to see a relatively large percentage of the students in the classes without masks. And that's going to really allow the virus a lot more opportunity to be transmitted, I believe.
Thank you, Dr. Unash. I tender the witness to the defense.
All right. Ross?
May it please the court. Thank you. Good morning, doctor. You're in Idaho?
Currently in Idaho, yes.
Thanks. And how long have you been in Idaho?
3 days.
And since then, where were you before you were in Idaho?
Tampa.
Okay. Would you agree with the statement that the COVID-19 science is an evolving science?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Okay. Is it fair to say that we'll know more tomorrow than we do today about COVID-19?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. I thought I heard you say that mask wearing is negligible. I think you would not agree with that, correct?
I would not agree with that.
Okay. So you would disagree with the CDC study of May of 21 that said that the lower incidence in schools that required mask use among students was not statistically significant compared with schools where mask use was optional. So you would disagree with the CDC on that, correct?
Well, once again, I think the real important point here is not whether you're using mask mandates or not, but you really have to, in these studies, compare the amount of masks that wearing that's being done in both of those places. Like I said before, in an ideal world, everybody would be wearing these masks without the need for a mandate. And if that was the case, of course, you don't see any difference.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Did you understand my question?
I believe, can you repeat the question?
Sure. My question would be that you disagree with the CDC May 21 report.
No, I do not disagree with the CDC May 21 report. But I would disagree necessarily, possibly with the conclusions of the report. Just because things are not statistically significant doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't significant. It depends on the size of the study and the amount of power that one has.
You mentioned that the Delta virus is much more explosive than previous variants, correct?
That is correct.
And then you likened it to a financial wealth advisor and building our nest eggs, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And when a financial advisor advertises, don't they always say that past performance is not indicative of future performance?
That's correct.
Okay. You work at the University of South Florida, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And you're the principal investigator for COVID-19 related issues, is that correct?
For one particular COVID-19 project, yes, correct.
Okay. Have you ever conducted a science-based test on children wearing masks in a classroom?
No, I have not.
Has anyone at USF done that?
No one that I'm aware of, no.
Do you believe that the Delta virus particle is much different in size than any of its predecessor particles of the virus? I'm sorry.
No.
Okay, I apologize. There's a little delay. So you're in Idaho and I'm here. So you said that cloth mask have a efficacy rate of something between 80 and 85%. Is that what your testimony is?
Roughly 80%. Yeah, those are the latest numbers that I've seen.
Yes, sir. What studies do you base that opinion on?
There's been a few recently published studies. I can't give you the actual references at the moment because I'm here in Idaho and I don't have access to my reference files. But if I can provide those as an exhibit later, I would be perfectly happy to do so.
Yes, sir. I would appreciate that. Just the studies that you're relying on for your opinion, that would be helpful. You mentioned you were asked about credible medical associations issuing opinions on mask wearing. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Has every credible medical association issued an opinion on mask wearing by students in a classroom?
I'm afraid I can't answer that question because I'm not really familiar with what every single credible medical association is doing.
The island hypothetical that you gave in your direct examination, would it be important to know that all the different variables on all the 3 islands were identical, correct?
Yes, that's what we're assuming.
Okay. And then you'd have
populations were totally susceptible.
And then you'd have to make sure all the ages were correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. And the ventilation's the same, correct?
Everything is the same.
Okay. Do you know of any study that's done that?
Of course not. That was a thought experiment.
You mentioned in Exhibit 7 the 0.2 mortality rate for children. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
So I didn't go to MIT, but that would mean you have a 99.8 survivability rate, correct?
That is correct.
You attack the Brown University study. I think your principal attack is it defies common sense, where the students that were unmasked didn't contribute to transmission. Words to that effect, correct?
Well, actually, it indicated not that they didn't contribute to transmission. It indicated that the students that were unmasked were actually protected.
Okay. And other than common sense, do you have any science studies that you're relying on other than common sense?
No, I do not. Okay. I should point out that many of the limitations that I brought up on that study were explicitly pointed out by the authors themselves within the study.
You talked about your reliance on the Center for Disease Control. Do you recall that?
Yes.
What studies do you believe the CDC is relying on to make its recommendation about mandatory mask wearing?
I believe they're relying a lot on the published studies that they're seeing out there, and also to a large extent on the data, the epidemiological data that they are seeing coming into the CDC at this point in time.
Yes, sir. Doctor, do you know which studies they're seeing out there?
I have no idea. I don't work for the CDC, unfortunately.
Would your answer be the same for the AAP?
Yes, it would.
Doctor, so I just want to be clear, you have not conducted an individual study of mask wearing in school by students, is that correct?
That's correct.
Which studies of mask wearing in schools are you aware of, given your responsibilities at USF?
Directly connected to my responsibilities at USF?
Well, I understood that you were sort of like an encyclopedia of knowledge for COVID-19 for the folks at USF, the principal investigator, et cetera. Is that not your role?
I am providing scientific advice to the emergency response group once a week. And that includes following the literature and trying to give an idea of what's the most recent studies in the literature. And also all the epidemiological data and the updates that are coming around.
But it's also your opinion here today that everybody should be wearing a mask, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm asking you what studies of classroom students wearing masks are you aware of?
I would have to go back and take a look at my reference list to provide those references for you.
If you could do that, that would be helpful. Doctor, are you familiar with the World Medical Association Declaration of Helsinki?
No, I am not.
You're not aware of the principles that it issued in 1964 that have been adopted?
Oh, the 1964 Helsinki Declarations, yes.
You're familiar with those now?
Yes. Yeah, those have to do with IRB and human use studies.
Doesn't it also have to do with recognizing a patient's rights?
Yes.
Okay. And you're familiar with the recently enacted Parental Bill of Rights by the state of Florida, correct?
Yes.
And you're familiar with Chapter 1014.04 that talks in Section E, the right to make healthcare decisions for his or her minor child. Do you disagree with that?
Do I disagree with that? No.
You believe that a parent should have that right, correct?
Yes. With the proviso that those decisions do not have a serious impact on others.
Mr. Bean, you didn't read the entire sentence in 114.04E. It says the right to make healthcare decisions for his or her minor child unless otherwise prohibited by law.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Does that change your answer, Doctor?
Well, it would change my proviso, which I said, which was that as long as this does not have a serious impact on others.
Right. So,
and I think that's included in that proviso by law.
Right.
I would hope.
Right. So your answer wouldn't change, right?
Correct.
Doctor, would you concede that there are different opinions among the experts in the medical field regarding the efficacy of mask wearing with students and the transmission of COVID?
Yes, I would. You're correct. I'm sure there are differences of opinion.
Yes, sir. And would you concede that the data and the studies are inconclusive as to the efficacy of mask preventing the transmission of COVID-19 in children?
In children? Yes, I would say that that's probably correct.
Doctor, are you aware of any scientific studies that exist that say mask wearing does not harm a child?
Yes, there are.
What are those studies that say mask wearing does not harm a child?
There are several studies that are out there that have been conducted regarding mask wearing early on. I can pull those references again for you as well. It basically shows that mask wearing does locally increase the amount of carbon dioxide around the face, but it does not affect any of the blood gas numbers in individuals, regardless of the age.
What's the effect of creating excess carbon dioxide around the mouth?
Makes you feel a little stuffy.
Could you lose some body functions if you ate too much carbon dioxide surrounding around your mouth?
If you have way too much, yes, of course. But apparently those concentrations in the that are developed around the masks are not sufficient to make any differences in that respect.
Yes, sir, doctor. Have you done any studies to see what effect psychologically there are on children that wear masks?
I'm not a psychologist, sir.
I'll say that that's an answer is no then, correct?
No. Okay.
Doctor, I think you said there are some studies out there that show that mask wearing is not harmful to children. What, as you sit here today, can you identify those?
Not at the moment, no.
Doctor, do you consider the Journal of American Medical Association to be an authoritative in your field?
Yes.
Okay. How about the International Journal of Epidemiology? Is that authoritative in the field of epidemiology?
Yes.
How about the Journal of Public Health?
Yes.
Okay. Doctor, have you had an opportunity to read any of the writings of Dr. J. Bhattacharya?
I have not read any of his writings directly, no, but I'm familiar with his thesis as outlined in the Great Barrington Declaration.
Are you familiar with the Santa Clara study that he chaired?
No, I'm not.
I think I asked you this question, but what studies are you relying on, or does the CDC or the AAP rely on to say that mask wearing is helpful?
Again, I have those references. I can pull some of those references out for you.
Okay. I apologize if I asked.
As far as the CDC goes, I believe when they reinstituted the recommendation for mask wearing, they had produced a slide deck that is publicly available that you can reference that explained the rationale for that.
Would you consider Dr. Bhattacharya as a leading expert in infectious disease epidemiology?
No.
Why not?
He's a health economist.
Have you studied his resume?
Yes.
But you haven't read anything that he's published. Is that what was your testimony?
No, I have not.
Doctor, have you been able to study Defendant's Exhibit 18, which talks about the different counties, comparing masked counties versus non-masked counties?
I was not provided Exhibit 18.
So you would need some time to study that in order to comment on it?
Yes.
Could you explain why one county's non-masking students might have the same rate of transmission as another counties that do wear masks?
That would probably, in some cases, have to do with a lot of the other confounding factors that are out there, such as the level of community transmission that's ongoing in the area.
Doctor, I noticed in an article that you believe that herd immunity is what is the reality of getting our country through COVID, correct?
Pardon me? Can you repeat that?
Yeah, you're quoted in a story that we will get to herd immunity through infection as well as vaccination.
Correct.
You believe that, right?
Yes.
Okay. You were also quoted, now I know the media always be trusted, but you're saying that the doctor expects us to be done with it by October. Does that mean that you expect the country to be done with COVID-19 by October 2021?
The current models, yes, indeed, are predicting that this should be over by October of 2021. But the models also did not predict the rise of the Delta variant. So I wish I could say that was the case. If all things do remain the same, yes, we should be on the back end of this by October.
Doctor, again, I don't place a lot of credibility in the media and the reporters. So,
Mr. Bean, I don't need you to give me your opinion on the media or any reporter. I don't think that's relevant in this case.
I was just
please ask questions.
Yes, sir. I'm just trying to orient the witness as to the article that he may not have studied that quotes him. So I apologize to the court.
All right.
The article says that the doctor said this will likely be the fourth and final wave of COVID-19. Did you say that?
Yes, I did.
And that's why you expect it to be done in October of 2021.
Correct.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Sure.
Thank you.
Your Honor,
yes.
This is Dr. Unash. I'm on my brother's borrowed computer, and he is supposed to be having a meeting that began at 10 o'clock, and we're already 8 minutes past when he needed to regain control of his computer.
All right, so let me ask Mr. Bean, do you have any more questions?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm not, I just want to make sure I go through my notes if you don't mind, Your Honor. Doctor, I'm going to try to.
We're going to have to stop and come back after his brother finishes his meeting.
Right. If you could give me 30 more seconds, okay. Doctor and Judge, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Dr. Unash, I am going to ask you one more question, but it'll be brief once everyone else is finished. Mr. Bean?
Hold on
Still
one
looking
second.
at notes?
Just 1 second. Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Nothing further, Doctor. Thank you. And your brother, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Unash, this will be very short, but you have been asked and have talked about both in cross and direct about the CDC. Could you just briefly tell me what is the CDC and what does it do?
The CDC is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They are tasked with epidemiological monitoring of all infectious diseases, well, in all diseases throughout the country, and making public health recommendations to how best to ameliorate the effects of those diseases.
And how long has the CDC been around approximately, if you don't know exactly?
The CDC was originally founded in Atlanta as a vector control operation back, I believe, in the 1940s. Okay,
and in your profession, is the CDC considered a reputable source of information in its area?
The CDC is considered the premier source of information in this area.
Okay. All right. So does that raise any questions? Does anyone wish us to ask? If you do, we might have to come back.
I have a question that'll take less than a minute, Your Honor.
Okay.
This is Erin Barnett speaking. Dr. Unash, just for clarification, a moment ago, Mr. Bean asked you if you had disagreed with the May 2021 CDC study. Did that CDC study rely on any Delta variant data?
It would not have, no. Delta did not really appear here in this country until late June.
I don't have any other questions, Your Honor.
All right, Dr. Unash, thank you very much. Mr. Bean, anything that as a result of my question?
Nothing as a result of your question. I just had one question for him that if I may.
Okay, make it quick. His brother's already in trouble for his meeting.
I understand.
Okay.
Doctor, I asked you about the particle size of the virus. Would you agree that the size of the virus is the distance your fingernail may grow in 90 seconds?
I have no idea how fast my fingernails grow, I'm afraid to say.
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Dr. Unash, thank you very much. Tell your brother we appreciate him letting you use his connection, and you're free to hang up and let your brother take over the internet in where you are.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Yes, sir. Okay. Bye-bye. So let's take an hour lunch break now and come back at 1:11. So again, I'm leaving my computer on. I'm leaving the Zoom on, but I will mute my screen and put a cap over my camera, but I'm leaving the mute on YouTube. I'm not stopping the session. We're just taking an hour break.